The Felony Report.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Clair.
Welcome back, my friends, to the Lions of Liberty podcast. This is episode number 165, and that means you can find today's show notes featuring everything we discuss in the show over at lionsofliberty.com/165. And during this holiday season, when you're out there shopping for gifts for your friends or your family, if you're generous. I'm not. I don't really do that. Hopefully you guys are more generous than I am. No, I'm just kidding. But while you're out there shopping for your friends and family, you can also help us out here at Lions of Liberty by shopping through our Amazon affiliate link. This costs you absolutely nothing to do while helping us fund and perhaps even expand our operation here at Lions of Liberty. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. Please do head on over to lionsofliberty.com/Amazon to shop through our link. We really do appreciate the help. And today we featured the return of our very popular segment known as
The Felony Report.
The Felony Report. That's right. The Felony Report is back. And here to talk about felonies with me is our felony expert, a guy who, well, we've heard from a couple times on our debate reaction shows, but it's the first time we've had a little felony chat in over 3 months. Mr. John Odermatt, welcome back to the show. Your show, our show.
What is up, man? It has been so long. I can't even remember the last time we did this, but it is great to be back. It truly is.
Yeah, literally been over 3 months. It was early September the last time we recorded an edition of the Felony Report.
That's right. Because it was before my daughter Ruby was born. So that was probably early September we did it.
Which is precisely why we went on a little hiatus here. Because I guess raising a baby takes time, or I don't know, you get tired, you don't sleep. That's what I hear. I don't know.
Yeah, well, at first it affected my sleep, but then basically in the middle of the night, my wife normally wakes up and takes care of that so I can sleep. But yeah, sure, it's taxing on her. But.
All right, good. Well,
I'm just kidding. It makes it sound like I'm a terrible dad. I do a lot of stuff, and the first week of her life,
bring home the bacon.
The first week of her life, I literally changed every single diaper. So, yeah.
And you do the most important thing, which is promote a more free society for your daughter to grow up in.
That's true. I do my part. I do what I can.
All right, so why don't we briefly, we're going to make an announcement towards the end of the show about the future of your sort of delving into the world of felonies, and but the first part of that announcement is that this is actually the final edition of the Felony Report. So after all this buildup, all this talk about you didn't know? I'm sorry, I thought we were on the same page here.
Tell me.
Yeah, no, we are actually wrapping up this Felony Report as a regular feature, even though it's been a few months since we've done one, but we're going to close down shop, sort of, but another shop might open down the street, and maybe we'll talk about that towards the end of the show. But final edition of the Felony Report, kids. So I'm sorry if you've been enjoying this segment. You're gonna have to find something else to do. But no, I'm just kidding.
We might have something else you might like.
We might. Please just listen to the end of the show. That's all we ask. No, that's called a high-level teaser, maybe a low-level teaser. I don't know.
Mid-level. I don't know.
Why don't we briefly, for anyone that might not have heard the Felony Report before, just give us the 30-second elevator speech version of what you've been doing with Felony Friday, why you're so passionate about the issues facing felons in this country.
So basically what I try to do with Felony Friday, I've been writing this column for 2.5 years. I try to dive into different sorts of felonies, but basically some felonies where people have really had their rights infringed upon. Either by police or maybe just by a ridiculous law, different kinds of things like that, or maybe just a crazy out there felony. Like we had the one a little while back where the people were throwing pecan pies at each other. So
that was a funny story.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous story, and it was in Colorado. So maybe there was little mind altering substances involved. I'm not sure.
It's possible.
But, anyway. Try to dive in and really look at whose rights are being violated. I think that's the main objective of the Felony Report, and to raise awareness about the plight of felons, as we like to say. We talk about the plight of felons. We talk about all the restrictions that felons have on their rights after they finish their prison sentence and they're released into society, so-called as free people. They're not allowed to vote. They're not allowed to. They don't have their Second Amendment rights and other things like that. There's so many restrictions. And, of course, that goes without saying, the restrictions of just carrying that label with you of being a felon, regardless of if you're a nonviolent offender, maybe it's a victimless crime and whatnot. So The main point, I guess, to make it a long story short, I didn't keep it to 30 seconds.
I made up that time limit. It was arbitrary. No worries.
The main point is to raise awareness about the plight of felons, I will say.
Sure. I mean, even in the private sector, I mean, just having that label can make it difficult for people to find places to live, for people to get work. I mean, even beyond just government laws, just the overall stigma that comes with that label of felony really just, it affects people in so many ways, and there are literally millions of people that carry that label in this country. So this is a very major issue, and it's one that affects many people. I mean, almost everybody at least has a family member that has been in jail or that has been convicted of a felony. So it really is something that affects everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation.
And I doubt it's 6 for most people. It's probably like 2 or 3 degrees of felonies, or first degree of felonies for some people, for the actual felons out there, sadly.
Is Kevin Bacon a felon? No?
I don't know, but he's probably got just 1 or 2 degrees from being one.
He's probably committed a felony today without even knowing it.
I bet he has, because there are so many things that are felonies that people don't even realize are felonies. I mean, there's this book, Harry Silvergate, that we've talked about before, and I'm looking to have him on the show eventually, because he's working on a new book. I've actually spoken to his people, but he is the author of 3 Felonies a Day, and it's basically a book that documents all the ways we commit felonies due to the ridiculous size of the legal code. I mean, it's ginormous. There's no way any human being could reasonably know all the laws in the books, and people routinely commit felonies without even realizing it. So this really is something that, if it doesn't affect you, it can. And especially in this day and age we're in, with the surveillance state where we're all being watched, all these felonies we're accidentally committing, many of them are probably being recorded in ways that we don't even realize. So scary stuff. 3
felonies a day. I have that on my Christmas list. So hopefully, if anyone out there is listening that is buying a present for me, you can pick that up and even do me one better, do us one better, and buy it through our Amazon link.
There you go. lionsofliberty.com/Amazon. That's right.
Harry Silvergate. Yep.
All right. Well, hopefully Santa will be shopping for that through our Lions of Liberty link. If you've been a good boy this year. I don't know how that all works. I'm Jewish.
I don't know.
So I don't have to be good to get presents in Judaism.
That's a matter of opinion.
You might want to think about converting. We don't have to be good at all. We just have to fast like once a year, and we're totally absolved of our sins, presents, but not of our felonies, sadly.
Just not eating just cleans you.
Yeah, it's that simple. Really effective method. So let's look at a few of the stories that you've, that obviously we can't cover everything you've been looking at in the last 3 months, because even through all this baby stuff, you have kept up your weekly column, which really is impressive. But let's look at a few stories, and then we'll tell everybody about the future of your work in the felony world, and what's going to change about that as it relates to this show. But I want to start looking at this. This story is really tragic. I mean, and it's something we talked about. I think we did mention it on one podcast or two, but I really want this story to. This is something so sad and tragic that I really don't think it can be discussed enough. I don't think people can be made aware enough of it and of the fact that this kind of thing goes on. So why don't you tell us about this guy in Michigan, this guy he was jailed for something very simple, basically a traffic ticket, but 17 days later, this man was dead in jail. So describe what happened here.
Yeah, it's really, really terrifying that something like this can happen in the United States of America in a so-called civilized society. But to get into this story a little bit, so what happened here, the man's name, David, I'm going to butcher his last name, I apologize for this, Stoizoviskis.
The least of his problems.
Yeah, so he, like Mark said, he was arrested he owed some traffic tickets, $772 worth. So the judge sentenced him to spending a month in prison. And going into prison, he was a drug addict. He was addicted to methadone, Xanax, Klonopin, which I'm not familiar with, but
a drug for anxiety,
which immediately makes him sort of an undesirable in the eyes of the law, even if what he's being arrested for isn't for that. And in the eyes of many people that might see this story, they'll say, well, he's a drug addict. I mean, he was hopeless anyway. I mean, he was going to get in trouble with the law anyway. I mean, I think that's an attitude you've probably seen a lot just posting the story around.
Which is kind of, I mean, when you really think about it, that's a really disgusting attitude for a civilized person to have, who's a drug addict, who cares about him? I mean, that's not acceptable, I mean, we're all human beings. We should want to take care of each other. And I mean, I think what this story highlights, once I get into it, is, lives matter. And the best way to rehabilitate somebody who's a drug addict is not to do so in jail, but to get into the story a little bit. So he's in jail. He starts going through withdrawal, obviously, and they actually misdiagnosed him. I don't know if it was intentional or they were just being They're just being jerks about it or just trying to ignore the problem. They diagnosed him with a mental disorder for the way he was acting, going through having his withdrawal symptoms. So in order to protect him from himself, as they were quoted as saying, they stripped him naked and put him in, I guess he went going between solitary confinement. He did have a cellmate at one time who was also naked. But to pile onto this, to make it even worse, the entire time that he's in this jail cell, he's naked and he's being monitored. He's under complete video surveillance the entire time. There's people sitting there watching him, maybe not 24 hours a day, but there is a video feed that people can look at and watch him. And at one time he fights the other guy in the cell because he's just hallucinating and going insane because he's going through crazy amounts of withdrawal, not having those drugs in his system. Fights this other guy. So instead of, maybe that opening some eyes saying this guy needs some help, they just take the other guy out of the cell and leave him still by himself naked. And it gets really disgusting. Where
I mean, how do you leave anyone naked in jail, let alone this guy who's clearly having some kind of issue, even if they didn't identify what that is?
I don't know.
I mean obviously that's rhetorical, but it's just so obviously inhumane, no matter what the person is accused of, let alone that he's there for a traffic ticket, essentially.
Yeah, you can go to. To watch this video. I suggest everyone should watch this just to see how horrifying it is, and this does happen in the United States of America.
And we'll link to all this in the show notes at lionsofliberty.com/165.
We'll link to it, but you can also go to while you're listening, if you want to, you can go to lionsofliberty.com /Felony Friday, and it's in the archive there. Felony Friday, man jailed for traffic ticket, dies in cell after 17 days. So the physical changes that this man went under were noticeable. He lost 50 pounds. He's suffering convulsions, laying on the floor while being under video surveillance. And people who are supposed to be protecting us, police officers, authority figures, watch this all happen and let the man die. And it's just, as Marc said before, I mean, everybody should know about this story and should know that this happens probably a lot more often than we know. There's probably stories like this that don't get reported.
And what's worse than the fact that this all happened, I mean, tragic things happen every day, sadly, but doesn't look like there's going to be any justice in this case. No charges are going to be brought upon anybody. It's just going to be kind of swept under the rug. There's some outrage. We're outraged about it. I'm sure his family is outraged about it, and I'm sure they are pursuing, legal courses of action around this, but it's certainly not going to come from the state. They're not going to be bringing charges on anybody for this, as far as I know.
Yeah, and the people who are responsible for it will face no consequences, right? They're not going to end up, having to serve any time in jail for murder, really, which is what happened here. It'll be, if anything, the state, that will take money from the taxpayers to, give some money to the family for pain and suffering of having to go through this.
Sure, even if there is a judgment at some point in a civil court, I mean, it's not going to come out of the pockets of the actual individuals who were on there committing this act. To me, it's an aggression. Even if he's in jail for a legitimate reason, you should be responsible for someone when you've put them in that position, even if they've committed a real crime, even if they're in jail for some sort of quote-unquote legitimate reason.
It's a traffic ticket, $772. He couldn't pay the fine. Judge throws him in jail. Probably sees this guy's a drug addict. I'm going to throw him in jail. That's really not legitimate to me. I mean, I think judges have the ability to sentence someone to a drug rehab program or something like that. I don't know. There has to be a better way in society for us to deal with situations like this. It's unacceptable to not be more civil.
Absolutely. Now, moving from Michigan, I actually want to move over to the state of Wyoming for a second, because they have a bill that, we talk about the war on drugs, and libertarians will often say, look, things are going so well. We're getting marijuana legalization across the country, medical marijuana, recreational marijuana in Colorado and Washington, and things are going well. And there's some truth to that for the most part. But at the same time, we can't forget that the war on drugs is still going quite strong, and it certainly doesn't seem to be winding down in Wyoming. So what is this bill that they're trying to pass in Wyoming about pot edibles, of all things?
Yeah, it's funny. They talk about...
Which I might add before I get into that. I'm already going to cut you off before you can say two words about it. But I mean, pot edibles. Compare that to what this kid was on. I mean, the drugs that this kid was on in Michigan. I mean, he was addicted to, what was it? Xanax, methadone, Klonopin, and those are all legal drugs. I mean, you need a prescription, but those are all legal. Those drugs resulted in his death. You know, part of the result of his death was from the officers ignoring his medical problems and treating him so inhumanely. The other half of his death was his own drug addiction. So, and those drugs are far more dangerous than, you know, pot or even in edible form. But go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, they're going after edibles because, you know, it's they say it's more potent, which I mean, it is to some degree. But, you know, what also is potent is hard liquor. And, you know, they put all kinds of different...
grain alcohol, I mean.
Yeah, grain alcohol, absolutely. So in Wyoming, they're trying to... Obviously, Wyoming, you know, I'm not a geography person per se, but I know Wyoming and Colorado are next to each other. So they're having a little problem there.
Sadly, that's probably more geography knowledge than most of our America, excluding our very informed audience, of course.
That is true. We do have the most informed audience on the interwebs. It's been polled, and that's a fact.
There you go. Thanks, Reuters, for conducting that poll for us.
Write it down. So Wyoming, the people there are not as liberal, I guess, as they are in Colorado, if that's just probably not the right word, but they're not as open to marijuana being used within their borders, a little more draconian. So they're trying to put a stop to the edibles specifically. So normally, if you're caught in the state of Wyoming, you're going to be charged based on the ounces of weed that you have. You can't really do that with edibles because it's more potent. You know, they're using an oil to make cookies or a piece of candy or whatever, something like that, or even just a THC pill. So the way that that the lawmakers have preferred or have proposed to criminalize this is by taking the entire weight of a cookie or a brownie or whatever baked good or piece of candy that a person could be caught with for having illegally, for possessing illegally. So they'll take all the butter and sugar and chocolate and flour and all the ingredients, and all of that stuff goes towards the weight. And anything over 3 ounces in weight, even if it's, you know, just a little tiny trace of THC oil in there, a little tiny trace of THC oil in your brownie or cookie, if it's in 3 ounces of cookies, then you're going to have a felony conviction.
It could be hardly any pot in reality. I mean, it could be even a weak pot cookie, but they're going to add up the amount of the cookie. And if there's any pot in it, it's the weight of the cookie that counts, which seems crazy.
Yeah, because they've said, I guess their excuse is that there are not certified crime labs in the United States that can analyze THC content of a marijuana edible. So this is why we have laws like this proposed. We had a similar thing, if you remember, back in Texas. I think it probably maybe a year ago or something. There was the teenager who was charged with a felony for having pot brownies. He was making the brownies, and his neighbor smelled the could smell the scent of marijuana cooking. Called the police, and he was arrested. He ended up getting out of that felony, though. But it's just amazing.
And he was facing possibly life for that.
Yeah.
Which is just mind-boggling that an 18, 19-year-old kid would have his life ended just for cooking pot brownies. This is insane to me. Whereas I live in California, where a 5-minute trip to the doctor and you walk into a store and you buy pot brownies. I mean, it's crazy that the differences in two states in the same country.
It is amazing. And it's amazing when you look at, we talk about our presidential candidates a lot, just the view on marijuana and the war on drugs overall between different candidates. For the most part, the entire Republican Party, with the exception of probably Rand Paul, I can't think of anyone else, would probably favor something like this Wyoming bill. On the Democrat side, I'm sure Bernie Sanders would be against it. Hillary Clinton, she'll probably conduct a poll to find out. And I don't know what Martin O'Malley would want to do. He's a robot, so
it's
there's no telling.
Depends on his programming. We don't have access to the code, so we're not sure.
But
all right, so let's move on then. I mean, there's this one topic I really want to touch upon. This is actually from another feature you write at lionsofliberty.com known as Second Amendment Watch, where you take a weekly-ish look at Second Amendment issues. And this one relates to a certain presidential candidate. I know he's a favorite of yours, Mr. John Ellis Bush. That's right, Jeb Bush. And what is Jeb Bush opposed to here when it comes to, he's a Republican, so he should be all for Second Amendment rights, right?
You would think so. And he wrote an article or a op-ed, an opinion piece in the Iowa Republican. It happened.
Did George Bush ever write an op-ed? I feel like he never did.
I think he paints them. I think he paints his opinion pieces.
George W. Here's some bushes and here's some cows. Here's my op-ed. All right. Anyway, so Jeb might already be smarter than George, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, he might be. He probably is. But anyway, that's not gonna, just that alone is not going to get him the presidency.
No, it's not.
So he writes this opinion piece. I think it actually ran like the day after, or maybe the same day as the San Bernardino mass shooting. Wasn't planned like that, obviously. But anyway, he comes out supporting, a real strong Republican piece, supporting Second Amendment rights. But he's not supporting everyone's Second Amendment rights. He's supporting Second Amendment rights for most citizens. He went on in the article to talk about, he was the governor of Florida, so he's got to brag about his very Republican and tough on crime record as the governor of Florida. And one of the things he did in Florida was he had legislation that he called 1020 life. So basically, the way that worked, if a felon used a gun in a crime, they received a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years. If a felon fired a gun in commissioning a crime, they received a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years. If a felon fired a weapon or wounded or killed another person, they were put behind bars for life, 10-20 life.
Now, I have no sympathy for people that commit crimes or that assault people, and especially people that use guns, because that actually offends me even more a little bit, because then it gives all other gun owners a bad name, and it makes people go call for gun bans and gun control and that sort of thing. But, that part of it isn't as offensive as what we're going to get to. But, but I still don't see why committing a crime specifically with a gun makes it way worse. Whatever you're doing, you should be punished for the crime itself, not for the specific tool. If you run over someone with a car, is that really worse? Is that really better than if you had shot a gun at them,
Right. And the punishment should be equal, right? We should have equality under the law. If you're going to, if a felon serves their time in jail, regardless if it's an actual violent crime and they serve, a significant amount of time in jail and they're supposedly rehabilitated, or if it's a victimless crime, a nonviolent crime, something that, we might agree here on this show and our audience would probably agree if it's something related to the drug war, that is, they shouldn't even have been in jail in the first place. But either way, they're out of jail. They should be considered reformed. So why would they have a different set of laws applied to them for committing a crime? If you kill someone, you kill someone. The felon who gets a gun, I guess they would have to be getting the gun illegally in most states because they don't have access. They don't have their Second Amendment rights in most states. If a felon gets a gun and kills someone, heck yeah, they should go to jail for killing someone. You don't need a law saying they go to jail for life. They have a trial by jury. The jury looks at the facts. They go to jail. They go to jail. They serve their time. There's no need for this other law. This is just a way for Bush to puff his chest and pretend that he's tough on crime. And in reality, he's just making a double standard for felons.
And this is a touchy issue, because gun rights with felons, because you'll even get people saying, that are pro-gun and everything. Yeah, but we at least, I'm all for keeping them out of the hands of felons. And on the surface, that makes sense. If you're maybe a casual follower of what felons means, you hear the word criminal, you think of a violent, terrible person. Of course, I don't want that person having a gun. But as we talked about at the beginning of the show, millions and millions of people in America are felons. And, not all of those people were violent criminals. Many of those people are victims of the war on drugs. Many of those people committed nothing we would consider a true crime against another person's property or another person's body. Many of those people are simply victims of this war on drugs or other victimless crimes, because there are so many felonies out there that people are committing, many of them without even realizing it, like we stated earlier. So this really does affect a wide swath of people, and you can't just say felons can't have guns, because it's kind of relates to the speech this past Sunday in a way, when President Obama suggested that anyone on a terrorist watch list should not be allowed to have a gun. Well, that sounds logical. Of course, so we know someone's a terrorist or is suspected of being a terrorist. Why should they have a gun? But then that's actually worse than the felony thing, because to get on a terrorist watch list, all you have to do is be suspected of something. If someone phones in an anonymous tip, if you do make some comments online that someone in the government doesn't like, boom, on the watch list. And there's over 1 million people on the terrorist no-fly list. So that's just another million people overnight that would just be immediately deprived of gun rights. So there are many ways that the government and the laws and the systems in place can attack the right to own a gun, the right to defend yourself. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense that you can let someone out from jail, but then still say they're so dangerous that they can't have a gun. It doesn't really make sense to me. If someone's too dangerous and you're afraid they'll use a gun, well, they probably shouldn't be out of jail anyway. You know, maybe they should have a longer sentence. Not that I'm necessarily advocating that either.
No, I mean you're right. I mean these laws that are targeted at gun felons, it's an illusion that they're actually making anyone safer. You know, there's not going to be anyone that, you know, was a felon and served their time, and, you know, they're seeking to harm someone. Maybe they're looking to rob a bank, or I don't know, maybe they're just angry and they're, you know, committing a crime for whatever reason. They're not going to think, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't be doing this right now, because my crime is heavier because I'm a felon. I'm going to have 20 years instead of somebody who's not a felon who's 10 years. People don't think that way. It's really just a way for Republicans to score points with Republicans. And as you said before, it's something that sounds like a good thing. It sounds like, yeah, let's keep guns out of the hands of felons. Well, then why if we're keeping guns out of the hands of felons, then should they really be released into a free society where they can easily just get a gun on the black market?
And again, not all people that are committed of even a gun crime are necessarily violent people. We talk about our past podcast guest, Brian Aitken, who was on the show last year. And I mean, his story is, you know, he had legal guns that he purchased in Colorado. He went through all the processes. He called the police in New Jersey, where he was moving to. And, you know, he went through every step that he was supposed to go through. The federal government let him fly into the state with the guns. He was even allowed to have the guns. But when he was moving from house to a new place of residence, the police arrested him, and just for possessing the guns that were legally his, and he was sentenced to 8 years in jail. Luckily, he only served less than a year, and as he was had his sentence commuted by Governor Christie. But the state sentenced him to 8 years for committing no crime. I mean, literally no crime. I don't just say that in the way that we say, well, it shouldn't have been a crime because it's, again, not a violation of rights. No, it literally wasn't even a crime in the state of New Jersey what he was doing, and he went to jail for 8 years because of an overzealous prosecution and a political system that inherently hates guns.
In New Jersey, they do. That's for sure.
Yeah, at least in New Jersey. And hey, even if Chris Christie was doing it for political points, it is good that he got Brian Aitken out of jail. So if nothing else, kudos to Christie for that, and a couple of good pardons he's had related to gun issues, even if we might be a little suspicious about how genuine he is about his seemingly newfound love of gun rights.
Chris Christie gets a kudos for the Second Amendment on the last Felony Report. That's amazing.
That is amazing. All right, so, we teased him at the top of the show that we were ending the Felony Report, but fear not, folks, because if you enjoy hearing John Odermatt and myself and the rest of our cast and crew here at Lions of Liberty discussing the plight of felons, that is not going to be ending. So why don't you tell us officially, John Odermatt, what is the future of your felony work? What's the next step here?
Well, the Felony Report is going to turn into
the Felony Friday podcast.
The Felony Friday podcast. That's right. It's going to be every single week, every single Friday. We're going to be looking at felonies that happened that week. Maybe we'll look at, 5 felonies that happened that week. Maybe we'll focus on one major felony that happened. maybe we'll bring on a guest who's an expert in the field of felonies. Maybe we'll bring on someone who's had their life personally impacted by serving time in jail for being convicted of a felony and seeing what they had to go through integrating back into society. There's all kinds of different ways we can take this. I'm super excited about it. Super excited to have a weekly Felony Friday podcast. And hopefully, we will still have every Friday, we will still have Felony Friday that'll publish. And what it'll be the podcast, and we'll have some show notes where maybe we go in depth more on a couple of the felonies we talk about. So I'm excited about it.
All right, so despite the fact that the Felony Report is winding down, when one thing dies like the phoenix, a new life arises, and we will have a Felony Friday podcast, and it's going to be, of course, on Fridays. So, hey, the synergy is just off the charts.
That's what we strive for, right? We try to make things easy.
And don't freak out, everybody. We've alluded to it a few times, but the Felony Friday podcast is not replacing any of the current podcasts you get. It's a brand new additional podcast that you'll get from Lions of Liberty every single week. So you'll have 2 other episodes every week, just like you do now. Plus, you'll get the Felony Friday podcast every single Friday. So exciting stuff. It's probably going to be about a month or so till we start this. I believe, do we agree on the launch date? It looks like January 8th will be the first edition of Felony Friday podcast.
Yeah, but I think by the time this airs, it'll be maybe a little less than a month. So, yeah.
All right. So you got time to tell all your friends, to spread the word about the Felony Friday podcast. We're very excited about it. And I guess next time I'll be talking to you will be next week when we got some more debates to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next debate.
Do you think the plight of felons will be a subject in the debates at all?
I don't know. It's
probably only if Rand Paul brings it up.
It'll probably all be about the Second Amendment and about terrorism and immigration.
That will be talked about. There's no doubt that that's going to be a major issue, that they're really going to talk about gun control a lot in both the Republican and Democrat debates. So it might give us some good talking points for future Felony Friday podcasts even. Who knows?
Yeah, of course. We will incorporate the presidential election into Felony Friday if and when possible.
All right. So it has been a good run here, I think, doing the Felony Report here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. But I look at it like this, Odie. I look at it like, Happy Days. Would you ever watch the show Happy Days? I was a big fan of Happy Days.
With the Fonz? Yeah.
With the Fonz.
He yelled at me at a function when I called him the Fonz.
Yeah, Happy Days was a popular show, and it got so big that it became too big for one show, and there became spin-offs. So you got Mork and Mindy was a spin-off from the Happy Days. Not many people know that. You got Laverne and Shirley. You got Joni and Chachi. So that's just what we're doing here. We're having a spin-off show. Which of those 3 do you think most relates to Felony Friday podcast?
I have no idea. I'll go with Joni and Chachi. Yeah.
I like where you're going. Which one of us is Joni is the question. Which one's Chachi?
We'll let the audience determine that.
All right. So you can tweet to us if you think Odie is Joni or Chachi, or if Mark is Joni or Chachi. All right, guys. Well, please do stay tuned for the Felony Friday podcast coming to you in 2016. Again, it's been a good run, Odie. Until next week, live long and live free.
Head of editing and mastering is John Odermatt.
Contact Johnny53 at gmail.com.